Well, good morning. Today is a very exciting day because I've got this brand new Kawasaki ZX4RR on loan for the next 24 hours. Ever since Kawasaki announced they were going to build a new 400cc 4-cylinder motorcycle, I've been absolutely dying to have a go. I've always loved sports bikes from the 90s like the CBR 250RR, VFR 400 NC30, and I feel like they're some of the most iconic and best sounding motorcycles ever produced. So this ZX4RR feels kind of like a spiritual successor to those. Now, considering that those 90s sport bikes are getting more rare, more expensive, difficult to maintain due to part shortages, this is probably as close as I'm gonna get to experiencing one of those classic motorcycles. So, enough talking, let's go for a ride. So, first impressions of the Kawasaki ZX4RR. Oh my god, this thing is amazing. From the second I picked this bike up from the dealership, I've been making some very unmanly noises, to say the least. Every time you open the throttle, it's just whoop. The beautiful part about it is I'm not actually doing that much illegal stuff. Like, one of the things I appreciate most about bikes is when they give you a lot of fun when you're still doing legal riding. Like, no crazy speeds, no crazy wheelies or burnouts or whatever. Just a smile they put in your face while still being a sane person. And this bike, I feel like it embodies that perfectly. Just like I imagine the old CBR 250RR and the VFR 400s of the old days. You just get to wing it out a little bit, have fun with it, and not take that much risk in either losing your license or dying. It doesn't have a lot of torque. That's kind of one of the things I was worried about before test riding this bike. But to be honest, I don't really think it matters. Like, you know what to expect. It's a 400cc 4-cylinder, and it's plenty fast enough once you open the throttle. And especially on a road like this. You're not gonna tell me you're gonna have more fun. Oh my god. On a R1 or a ZX6 or whatever your super sport of choice is. This is just... Oh my god. Oh shit. And still doing kind of legal stuff. I used to own a Honda Grom for the same principle as this. Like, you get to utilize every road, every traffic light. It just opens up a whole lot of more fun. Like the tight road, the twisty roads, where you're usually quite frustrated by a big bike because you can't. Hold on, gotta do it. Oh my god. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, just you get to do stuff like that, you know, hold it open a little bit, second gear, third gear, and on a leader bike you would already have lost your license, probably end up in the canal over here, but on this bike it's just fun and not intimidating. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. Like, these bikes died out for a reason in the 90s. Like, they were quite expensive, especially compared to the 600cc counterparts. But now this and the ZX6R, at least over here in Holland, there's 3,000, almost 3,500 euros difference. So, I mean, this bike over here, it's 10.5 grand, so it's definitely not cheap. But a ZX6R is almost 14,000 euros now. And like I said, this is so much more fun. So, give me the choice. Not that I have this much money anyway, but if I had to choose, just get this, you know. It's so much more fun. And even when you would take this thing on track, like yeah, and even going on the track, I don't think you would miss out that much because listen to that. I'm not going that fast. Okay, now let's talk about some other things other than the ridiculous amount of fun I'm having today. Riding position. one of the first things I noticed when I got on this bike is it's really compact, really small, as you might expect from a 400cc bike. But it's not that much bigger than my old Ninja 300, I would say. It feels surprisingly compact being a 4-cylinder. And adding to that, the riding position is a little bit forward, like you land on the bars just a little bit, but I actually quite like that, especially when compared to some naked bikes like the MPO7 I used to own. I actually like leaning forward into the wind a little bit, because on the highway you don't get blasted back as much. And I wouldn't say I have a lot of knee room, but a surprising amount. Like, it feels totally fine. I could probably ride this bike all day. The seat is quite nice. The throttle response is really smooth. I've been riding this around town a little bit as well, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, you don't have any torque pretty much, but you can ride 6th gear at like 20-30 kilometers an hour, and the engine is so smooth and perfectly happy. Okay, let me demonstrate. 6th gear, 30 kilometers an hour, 2000 RPM. Bear in mind, this thing goes all the way to 60, and I'm at 2 now. Full throttle. I mean, it actually goes pretty well, and it's so smooth. So, yeah, is this a perfect everyday bike? No, definitely not. Like, you would probably, well, definitely miss the torque of a 2-cylinder bike. But I feel like for how niche this bike is and how small the target audience is, how small the breadth of capability might seem, it's actually surprisingly refined and smooth and easy when you want it to be. Like the clutch as well, for example. I could literally one finger clutch this thing. So yeah, although I don't think many people are actually buying these things, because I get it, it's not that versatile of a bike. You could totally daily this thing and go on longer trips and take it to the track, and I think you would just have a really nice time. Especially on roads like this. Tight, twisty, not too fast. Oh my god. Just leave it a second and enjoy. Probably piss off your neighbors and all the cyclists over here, but don't care. Just don't care.
So it's a couple hours later and I figured I'd stop, get some B-roll, take some photos and also talk about how this thing looks. I mean, in general, I think it looks pretty good. I think it fits in nicely between the Ninja 400 and the 636. I guess where this bike is positioned, so in that way they nailed the styling. Generally, I'm not a big fan of this much color on my motorcycles. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the boldness in the KTMs or the greens on the Kawasaki's. But I mean, it's a Kawasaki sport bike, so it should be green, right? Although I do have to say they also make the Heritage livery, which harks back to the ZX-R 750 and the ZX-R 400 from the 90s. And that would probably be my pick of the bunch because, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like this is kind of a spiritual successor to the early 90s sport bikes. And I feel like that color scheme would fit this bike really well. I'll probably come back to you tomorrow morning when I bring this bike back to the dealership and also give you my conclusion.
Well, good morning and welcome to day 2. So after having ridden this Kawasaki ZX4RR all day yesterday, having some sleep, gathering my thoughts, I thought I'd share some of the things I don't like about this bike. So let me flip this camera around and I'll show you guys. So one of the things that I noticed throughout the day is I have some issues with this gearbox. And not that it's a bad gearbox, but there are some quirks. So Kawasaki introduced a feature, I guess it's a safety feature, where you can't switch into neutral when you're still riding. And that might not sound like a huge deal, but as someone who shifts into neutral as they're coming to a stop at like 10 kilometers an hour, it feels so annoying and so restrictive. And I think you might get used to it, but it also feels like one of the things like, why even bother trying this, you know, like it just feels like you're taking away freedom. Another gripe I had with this bike is with the quick shifter actually, in that it's not that smooth. Like 70 or 80% of the time it works quite well, but especially considering that this is a small capacity sport bike, it's quite peaky in its power delivery, you're going to be up and down the gearbox quite often. And I don't know, I just felt like it didn't perform as well as I'd expect. I did some first, second, third gear roll-ons, mid-high RPM, and especially first to second, it's just really jerky. So yeah, it's not that satisfying to use, unfortunately. And another issue I encountered throughout the day is with this seat. As I said, it is quite comfortable, but if you look at this from this perspective, it's quite sloped upwards. And what that does is it forces you all the way forwards in the seat. So although there's a decent amount of padding, as soon as you try to scooch backwards, you find yourself scooching forwards again within like 20 seconds. And that's also one of the things that's quite annoying. Now, one of the things that did surprise me about this bike yesterday is how much fun it is to ride in the city. It looks great, it sounds great, you get to bang through the gears, and yeah, it makes you feel special in the way sports bikes should. So yeah, something I did not necessarily expect, but I was pleasantly surprised to find out. Now, this is actually quite a sad moment because I've got to hand this bike back in like 1 hour. So I'm gonna hop on, wrap this video up, give you my conclusion, and yeah, take it back to the dealer.
Alright, so how has my opinion evolved over the past 24 hours riding this Kawasaki ZX4RR? Well, to be honest, for the first 3 hours it was mainly laughing and shouting and screaming and having an absolute blast of a time. So that bike definitely has this in the books. I mean, how could it not? But I'm glad I took a longer test ride on this. I'm glad I took it out for 24 hours because as the day progressed, I noticed my opinion or attitude toward the bike changed a little bit. And I think that's due to the fact that it actually wants so much to just keep riding it open, keep shifting gears. And although that's fun for a short blast and twisty roads and the racetrack, and although it is quite refined around town, I'll give it that, it can get a little bit tiring after a while. Just shifting, revving. Objectively, I don't really have that many complaints. Like I said before, the seat and the gearbox are not perfect, but I mean, they're totally fine and livable. The bike is really livable as well in general, so the clutch is easy, everything just works really smoothly, really easily. But I can't tell why these bikes don't sell that well over here in Holland, because you can definitely notice that although you could daily it's definitely not ideal. And I guess that perfectly sums up this bike, that its biggest strength is the fact that you have to work for the power, work for the emotion, but it's also its biggest downside. It's not that flexible, and I guess that's to be expected when you look at the brief of this bike, look at the spec, look at the old 90s sport bikes. They were also pretty much full spec superbikes, just with smaller engines. So I guess this was to be expected, but I think when you take a shorter test ride on this, you'll fall absolutely in love. But if you spend a little bit more time on it, you do start to notice the sheer focus Kawasaki has taken with this bike. And it's definitely not a bad thing. I mean, if you're looking for that, if you're looking for a weekend toy or a track day bike, this will deliver so much fun to you. So I guess that brings me to my conclusion. Would I buy this bike for myself? I mean, as an only bike, no, to be honest. I would rather have something a little bit more versatile, probably a 2-cylinder to be honest, like a lot of the competition, which although might not be as exciting once you rev them out, they are just a lot more flexible, a lot more versatile, also offer you a lot of fun at lower RPMs, a little bit more accessible performance, as to put it into words. But as a second bike or third bike, I think this thing would be absolutely phenomenal. Take it out on a Sunday blast, take it out on a track day, and I think you'll be having an absolutely amazing time. That being said, I am very grateful to have experienced this bike, living with it for 24 hours instead of just taking it for a short test ride, because I do feel like I've gotten a bit of a taste what those 90s sport bikes like the CBR 250RR or the VFR 400 might have actually been like. So yeah, and that, if you look at it that way, I would definitely recommend everyone to go and ride this bike, because it's an absolutely unique experience, absolutely lovely. But now it's a sad moment because I'm taking this thing back to the dealership. So I'm gonna thank you guys for watching, take this thing back, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.